I left behind the days when I felt like a draft horse throughout my life. The divorce court became the moment I broke my silence in front of everyone. But that was just the beginning. A new commission, dark secrets, and an unexpected love. As true faces were revealed, no one could have predicted events would unfold this way. As I stepped through the courthouse doors, the sound of my shoes echoing on the cold stone floor mirrored the sense of worthlessness that had clung to me for years. In just a few hours, I would have to face the scornful gazes of those around me in this place where I was about to fight the most important battle of my life. The faded blue dress I wore felt like a reflection of the self I had lost over the years, a woman who had stopped caring, who had given up on herself. But I was here to change that. As I approached the entrance, I saw William. He was with his mother, Jessica, and his lover, Isabella. Isabella scanned me from head to toe with her usual smug smile, while Jessica whispered mockingly, "Did she really come to court in that dress?" William smirked, curling his lips as he murmured, "You could ride her like a draft horse? She's trying so hard to look strong." Their laughter echoed in the hallway, and a wave of fury surged within me. But I controlled myself. I couldn't afford to give them a single moment to think they were right. When the judge called the hearing to order, my voice trembled slightly as I spoke. "William cheated on me during our marriage. He has been in a relationship with someone else for a long time," I said. The judge turned to William, who responded with a smirk and those condescending eyes. "Yes, we've been living apart for years. Amara, no longer meets my standards," he said, adding with a snide laugh. "Who would want someone like her?" The courtroom erupted in laughter, and I felt a mix of shame and anger bring tears to my eyes. But those tears weren't a sign of defeat. They were the beginning of something new. I straightened myself quietly in my seat and took a deep breath. My hand slowly moved to the buttons of my faded blue dress. The confident expression on William's face vanished as the turquoise, elegant, and bold dress beneath was revealed. The courtroom fell silent in an instant. The ridicule on their faces was replaced by astonishment. At that moment, I let my hair down, and as my golden curls cascaded over my shoulders, I felt every eye in the room fixed on me. "I am not a draft horse, William. I am an artist, and I create beauty," I said with a resolute voice. The room was engulfed in a profound silence, even the judge looking surprised. Before them stood a completely transformed woman, strong, dignified, and unstoppable. This was only the beginning. Standing there, reborn and resolute, I felt the first step of my new life take shape. But the road ahead was long. The fight had just begun. As I stepped out of the courtroom, an indescribable turmoil churned within me. There was a sense of victory, yet an equally deep sadness. William's face, the smug expression of Isabella seated next to him, and Jessica's silent but piercing gaze swirled in my mind. In that moment, everything became clear. Every time I had remained silent until now was a victory for them. But this story was going to have a different ending. The air was crisp, and the wind brushed against my face. I glanced at the old blue dress I held in my hands. It had symbolized me for years, worn, burdened by the weight of the past, and a reflection of how William wanted me to be seen. Taking a deep breath, I flung it decisively into the nearest trash can. Tossing that old dress felt like saying goodbye to my old life. The old Amara was no more. For a while, I wandered aimlessly, letting my steps take me wherever they wished. I wasn't walking with the weight of my past, but with dreams of my future. Every moment in the courtroom replayed vividly in my mind. William's mocking gaze, Isabella's fake confidence, Jessica's quiet judgment. They had all been mirrors of my broken self-esteem. But today, I shattered those chains. I had reclaimed my respect and self-worth. As I continued walking, I stopped at a bus stop. With the little money I had, I bought a ticket to get home. When I boarded the bus, The silence inside was comforting. I sat by the window and watched the leaves dance under the glow of the streetlights outside. It felt good to blend into the ordinary crowd where everyone was just going about their lives, but within me, there was no silence. I was filled with plans to rebuild my life. I would do whatever it took to pursue my painting career and make up for the years William had forced me to live as a shadow. When the bus dropped me off in my neighborhood, every corner reminded me of my old life. It felt as though I was returning here for the last time. This place no longer defined me. Walking into my small apartment, I looked at its cold walls and took a deep breath. I headed to the tiny kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. As I sat at the table, my gaze fell on a blank canvas. It wasn't just for a painting. It symbolized the beginning of my new life. That night, I picked up my brush and made my first stroke. The fear that once clouded my eyes had been replaced with newfound courage. This time, I would write my own story. In this story, no one would suppress me, and no one would use me as a stepping stone. With every stroke of the brush, I began to erase the scars of the past. Before me lay a pure white future, waiting to be painted anew. That morning, as I walked toward Michael Chandler's house, a mix of excitement and unease swirled within me. My task was simple: to paint a portrait. Yet the atmosphere surrounding this house seemed to pull me into something far deeper. Calvin's cryptic remarks, Stella's cold stares, and Michael's warm yet vulnerable demeanor. It felt like everyone was hiding a secret, and these secrets were dragging me into a vortex. When I arrived, Stella opened the door once again. Her eyes carried that familiar look of judgment, as if silently asking, "You again?" She didn't utter a word, but her disdainful gaze swept over me from head to toe. I stood tall and said calmly, "I'm here to continue working on Edwin's portrait." Stella stepped aside to let me in, her voice icy as she said, "It would be best if you finish this job quickly." I wasn't sure what job she was referring to, the portrait or my presence in the house, but I couldn't let such remarks deter me. Edwin's innocent smile and Michael's kind demeanor reminded me why I had to complete this. Edwin was sitting on the large leather couch in the living room, playing with his toy train set. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Olivia, are we going to continue the portrait today?" he asked with excitement. His pure energy instantly melted away my tension. "Of course, Edwin," I said. "We'll make more progress today, and maybe we'll finish it soon." I set up my easel, prepared my brushes, and positioned Edwin carefully. As he held his little teddy bear tightly, the innocent smile on his face brought genuine life to the portrait. But as my brush touched the canvas, the tension in the room seemed to intensify. A while later, Calvin entered the room silently. His presence startled me for a moment. The impoverished, weary man I had encountered on the bus just a day earlier now looked entirely different. Dressed in a polished tweed jacket and leaning on a cane, he walked with deliberate steps. Yet the profound expression in his eyes remained unchanged. "You're doing a fine job," he said, his tone both kind and layered with meaning. Then turning to Edwin, he said, "My grandson always shines like this." After a pause, he added in a low voice, "But not everything in this house is as bright as it seems." His words sent a shiver through me. "What do you mean?" I asked, but Calvin simply shook his head and left the room without elaborating. As his cryptic words lingered in my mind, I noticed Stella watching me from the doorway. Her gaze carried both a threat and a hidden truth. I continued working on the portrait that day, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. Calvin's remarks, Stella's demeanor, there was something buried deep within this house, and uncovering it might just be my responsibility. Yet I couldn't foresee that these secrets would soon pull me into a much greater danger. As I worked on the portrait, Calvin's words kept echoing in my mind. There was a heaviness in the air of this house, an oppressive tension that refused to dissipate. Aside from Edwin's innocence, nothing about this place brought any peace. With every stroke of my brush on the canvas, it felt like I was trying to unravel the house's dark secrets. Yet Stella's constant watchful eyes on me only heightened my unease. "Olivia," Stella called from the doorway, her tone sharp. "I hope you finish your work on time. Otherwise, we'll have to find alternative solutions." I didn't know what lay behind her veiled threat, but I tried to keep my composure. "Of course," I replied calmly. "I'm doing my best to complete the portrait." Turning back to Edwin, his cheerful face offered me a moment of comfort, but it was fleeting. As soon as Stella left the room, Calvin slipped in quietly once again, his expression graver than before. Leaning in close, he whispered, "I found something." "What is it?" I asked, setting down my brush and turning to him. Calvin pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "I found this in Stella's room," he said. As he opened it, I saw pages filled with scribbled notes. Dates, names, and numbers were listed in careful handwriting. Calvin pointed to a line. "Here's a company name, Moonlight Enterprises. Michael signed a deal with them, but he doesn't know the details. Stella, on the other hand, is deeply involved." I was stunned. "Why is this important?" I asked. Calvin's face grew more serious. "Because Stella's only goal is money. She might be using this deal to defraud Michael, but I need proof." "What can I do?" I asked, trying to grasp the weight of the situation. Calvin locked his eyes on mine. "You need to help me," he said. "The only way to uncover what's happening is for us to investigate. Stella doesn't see you as a threat. She's not paying attention to you." I hesitated, caught between agreeing and refusing, but the desperation in Calvin's eyes swayed me. "All right," I said. "What do you need me to do?" "Place a camera," Calvin said, "in Stella's office. We need to monitor her, to see what she's doing and who she's talking to." The idea unsettled me. Spying on someone felt morally wrong, but if Calvin was right, Stella was on the verge of ruining Michael's wealth and reputation. "Okay," I said. "I'll try." That evening, armed with the small camera Calvin had given me, I crept into Stella's office. My heart was pounding wildly. If I were caught, the consequences would be severe. Somehow, I managed to hide the camera behind a large potted plant in the corner of the room. At that moment, the gravity of what I was doing hit me. This wasn't just about Stella. It was a move that could impact everyone in this house. As I exited the office, a sense of relief washed over me, but it was shadowed by the realization that this was only the beginning. When I returned to my room that night, Calvin was waiting for me. "It's done," I told him. He looked at me with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "What you've done is incredibly important." Yet I knew this was fraught with danger. Stella was no ordinary woman, and this game was part of something far more intricate. It was then that I realized uncovering the secrets of this house would be far more complex and perilous than I had anticipated. That day, I returned to Edwin's room to continue working on the portrait. Edwin was carefully placing his toy train on the tracks, occasionally turning to flash me a bright smile. His innocence momentarily made me forget the storm of chaos swirling around me, yet the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong never fully left. I knew I needed to review the footage from the camera I'd planted in Stella's office as soon as possible. I was eager to talk to Calvin that evening, but for now I had to focus on finishing the portrait. "Today, I'm going to make your picture even more beautiful," I told Edwin. "Are you ready?" "Beautiful?" Edwin asked, tilting his head. "Why does everyone want to be beautiful?" His question caught me off guard. It was surprising to hear such a profound question from a child. "Because sometimes beauty helps people see the goodness inside," I replied. Edwin smiled. "But you already make beautiful things, Olivia. You paint." His innocent words warmed my heart. Despite all the turmoil and deceit I had encountered in this house, Edwin's words reminded me that something pure still existed here. As I worked on the portrait, Stella appeared in the doorway. "How's the portrait coming along?" she asked in her cold, detached tone. "Almost finished," I replied. "Good. Stella said, scanning the room with her piercing gaze. "The sooner you finish, the better for all of us." Her harsh demeanor unsettled me, as though she wanted nothing more than to see me leave. After she walked away, Calvin came to me, his face etched with concern. "We need to watch the footage tonight," he said. "I have a feeling we'll find something." "All right," I agreed, "but we have to be careful. Stella might be watching us." That evening, Calvin and I huddled together to review the footage from the hidden camera. On the screen, Stella sat at her desk writing something. Then she made a phone call. The audio was faint, but I could make out certain key words. Michael, contract, and Moonlight Enterprises. "We need to understand what she's discussing," Calvin said, his brow furrowed. In the later moments of the footage, Stella retrieved a document from beneath her desk and signed it. Calvin leaned closer to the screen. "This must be something that could hurt Michael," he said. I now knew planting the camera had been the right decision. It was clear that Stella was hiding something. But what to do with this information wasn't yet clear. Calvin turned to me. "We have to tell Michael," he said. "What if he doesn't believe us?" I asked. "He will," Calvin said firmly. "He has to." That night, we resolved to show Michael what we had discovered about Stella. But we knew we had to proceed with extreme caution. Stella wasn't the type to back down easily, and we both understood this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. We'd taken the first step, but the war was far from over. That night, Calvin and I spent hours crafting a plan. We had to find the right moment to reveal Stella's true colors to Michael. The more I thought about how far Stella might go, the more uneasy I felt. And amidst it all, Edwin stayed on my mind, a child caught in the middle of this storm. I couldn't let him be harmed. The next morning, Calvin and I decided it was time to confront Michael. "You start the conversation," Calvin said. "I'll step in when needed." His background as a lawyer gave me confidence that we could handle this delicate situation. We found Michael in his study, absorbed in a stack of files. When he saw us, he looked up and smiled. "Olivia, how's the portrait coming along?" he asked. "It's nearly finished," I replied, but the nervous tremor in my voice didn't escape him. His smile faded and he furrowed his brow. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Michael," I said, taking a deep breath, "there's something very important you need to know. Please, listen carefully." Calvin stood silently in the corner, watching me with calm intensity. Michael leaned back against his desk. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I held out a flash drive. "You need to watch this," I said. "We have serious suspicions about Stella, and you can't ignore this." Michael took the drive and plugged it into his laptop. As the footage played, the room fell into a heavy silence. Stella's phone calls, her handling of documents, and her conversations were all there. Michael's face grew pale as he watched. "Moonlight Enterprises," he murmured. "This can't have anything to do with my company." Calvin stepped forward. "Unfortunately, it's worse than you think. Stella appears to have forged documents in your name. There's also a strong indication she's been conspiring with someone to sabotage your business." Michael turned to Calvin, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "Is this true? Could Stella really be doing this?" "I'm afraid so," Calvin replied. "I don't know how much you've trusted her, but these findings clearly show the extent of her schemes." Just then, the door swung open and Stella walked in. Her eyes darted between us and her expression immediately shifted. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice laced with menace. Michael turned the screen toward her. "Care to explain this, Stella?" he asked, his voice rising with barely controlled fury. Stella froze for a moment before regaining her composure and smirking. "You've been spying on me. That's illegal, Michael. You'll pay for this," she retorted. Calvin, remaining calm, said, "Stella, you've got far more to answer for than we do. Not only have you attempted to sabotage Michael's company, but you've also betrayed his trust. And let's not forget how you've used Edwin in your manipulative games." The mask Stella wore had completely fallen. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice trembling but defiant, as if still searching for a way out. Michael's gaze didn't waver. I owe you nothing. Leave this house now and never come back, he said with finality. His tone made it clear the game was over. Stella opened her mouth to argue but saw the determination in Michael's eyes. She had no choice but to retreat. Slamming the door behind her, she left the room. The three of us exhaled deeply, the weight of the confrontation lifting slightly. But we knew this was only the beginning. Stella wouldn't give up so easily. Calvin turned to Michael. We need to thoroughly investigate the state of your company. There's no telling what else Stella's plans might have affected. Michael nodded. You're right. I'll do whatever it takes. But first, we need to make sure Edwin is safe from all this. In that moment, I realized how much Michael valued not only his company, but his role as a father. After all Stella's dangerous games, it became clear that I needed to stay by Edwin's side. To win this battle, we all had to stand together. That moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that Stella wouldn't give up so easily. Michael and Calvin seemed to share my thoughts. The silence in the room was thick with tension. Stella had left the house, but we all knew her schemes were far from over. Michael sat at his desk, burying his face in his hands as he let out a deep breath. How did I not see this? He muttered, his voice heavy with anger and disappointment. Calvin placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. This isn't your fault, he said calmly. Stella was meticulous in her actions, but now the truth is out, and we can fix this. I chimed in, Michael, we have the evidence to completely dismantle Stella's plans. You need to act quickly to protect your company. Michael lifted his head, determination glinting in his eyes. You're right, he said. I'll call my lawyers immediately. We need to nullify the contracts Stella signed and sever all ties with Moonlight Enterprises. Most importantly, we need to keep Edwin safe from all of this. Edwin, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around him, was playing in another room. His innocence was a stark reminder of what was at stake, and protecting it became our top priority. Michael's protective tone and fatherly resolve moved me deeply. Calvin, with his background as a lawyer, stepped in with practical advice. We need to anticipate Stella's next moves, he said. She might try legal action against us or look for other ways to sabotage the company. Michael nodded and picked up his phone to contact his lawyers. Within an hour, they arrived at the house. During the meeting, Michael detailed Stella's actions, presenting the evidence we had gathered. The lawyers devised a plan to nullify Stella's fraudulent agreements and address the legal ramifications of her actions. Calvin's expertise and strategic input were invaluable, lending a sense of confidence to everyone involved. The following day, we learned that Stella had attempted to appeal the situation, but her arguments held no weight. Michael's lawyers presented solid evidence of her forged signatures and manipulative schemes. By the end of the day, Stella's ties to the company were severed, and legal proceedings against her were initiated. While all of this unfolded, I stayed close to Edwin. His innocence and joy were like a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. One day, he looked up at me and asked, Olivia, will you always stay here with me? His question tightened my chest. I wanted to give him the reassurance he needed. Of course, Edwin, I said with a warm smile. I'll always be here for you. That evening, Michael returned home with a look of relief. The legal process against Stella has begun, he said. We're in control now, and I'll make sure Edwin has a safe and stable environment. In that moment, I saw the depth of Michael's strength and sense of responsibility. Despite his disappointment, he was determined to protect his son, and that touched me deeply. A few weeks later, I finished Edwin's portrait. When Michael saw it, his eyes filled with emotion. This isn't just a portrait, he said. It's a testament to my son's purity and innocence. Calvin stood in front of the painting, studying it intently. You've done an incredible job, Olivia, he said. Art isn't just about skill, it's about the soul, and you've captured that in every brushstroke. On the day I delivered the portrait, Michael organized a special dinner to thank me. Edwin sat at the table, his joyful expression making everything worthwhile. At the end of the evening, Michael turned to me and handed me a small box. "Olivia," he said, "you're not just an artist. You're the glue that held our family together during this ordeal. So, will you spend the rest of your life with us?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready to be a part of your family, always." In that moment, I felt my life beginning anew. Stella's ambition and schemes had failed, and together with Michael, Edwin, and Calvin, we had started a new chapter. Life can be complicated, but with the right people, anything is possible.